All right, so welcome to Cognigy's Tech Update in February 2023. I'm Sebastian, and before we dive in, let me just set the stage for our experts. Our R&D teams have been extremely busy extending and improving the Cognigy AI platform, so it's no surprise that we have a packed agenda. We'll start with a tour of new features and functions ranging from improvements in the Flow editor up to our latest LLM and generative AI capabilities. Derek and his team of experts will share a look behind the scenes and guide you to get the most out of your favorite conversational AI platform. We'll then give you an outlook on some of the things that we're working on. And for that, Cognigy's co-founder, Benjamin Meyer, will enter the stage and share some exclusive insights. Just a few housekeeping notes. Everyone will be in listen-only mode during the webinar, and of course, you're invited to use the Q&A function to share comments or questions. Today's recording will be shared afterwards and will be available on our product blog and in the Cognigy AI Help Center. And with that, let's kick it off.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the team meeting we're about to have, where we're going to look at some new features in Cognigy and how we're using them. My name is Derek Roberti, VP of Technology with Cognigy here in North America. And we thought we'd take a different approach today to introducing some new Cognigy features to you instead of doing our traditional screen share and fairly linear style demo. We thought, let's just bring you into a conversation that we might have here on the team already. See what you think. You can tell us when you're done if this was a good way for you to learn about new features. Or if you want something different, just let us know that too. But I'm going to bring on our cast of characters. Mr. Zach Malloy, say good morning or good afternoon.
Afternoon. Good to be here.
And I'll bring on James as well. All
Hello.
right. Hey, James.
Hey,
And then last
James.
but not least, let's bring on Jamie.
Hiya.
Hey there.
Jamie.
How's everyone doing this morning? Or it's still
Doing
morning
well.
for me.
Doing
Good.
well.
Good. Well, a few things I want to share with you is we'll talk about kind of the work that we've been doing, but after we're done, I'm actually going to bring on one of our co-founders and a principal architect here at Cognigy, Benny Mayer, and he's going to share us some amazing stuff about how we are managing our large operational environment here at Cognigy. So if you're an ops person or have always wanted to learn more about Kubernetes and how we use that within Cognigy, stay tuned for that. But to get started, we are working on a project and I just want to check in with everybody to see how things are going. James, I know you have been working in the tool a lot from a builder and NLU perspective, and I just wanted to hear what's going on? What's been helpful for you as you've been working through this?
Absolutely. Yeah, let me know when you guys can see my screen here.
Almost, and we gotcha.
We got it.
Perfect. Yeah, so the interaction panel up here for the early stages and really throughout the entirety of development of any chatbot is kind of my best friend as a conversation designer and somebody who does most of the NLU work. So there are a few things in the interaction panel that are new and extremely helpful to me and pretty much anybody who uses the Cognigy platform. So one of those things is, let's just click on this intent here. This will give us, we will get a text for the policy details for our insurance here. And one of the nice things we can do is if we're going to be using this bit of context here, like the policy number, we can actually create a token out of this. So we don't have to type, use Cognigy scripts with the curly brackets and type context.policy number. And actually, if I highlight this before I go ahead and create token, it'll actually pre-fill the name here. And we can keep it as is, or we can make it look a little more fancy here. And then once I create this, oh,
this may already have
this may already exist.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Good.
Yeah.
Even better.
Yeah.
So now if I want to use this, I can go ahead and say you're calling about, and I could either do the classic context policy number, whatever it may be defined as in the context object here, Or I can hit the search token list here on the side, and I could actually just start typing it in. And there's our new one. This is the one we had already created. And this is just really helpful because, we can use these different bits of context throughout the flow. And instead of having to type it out every time, we just have it here convenient in the UI.
This is actually one of my most favorite features we've introduced in the past months. It's a small thing, but getting out of the business of having to copy the input object or the context object into JSON Pathfinder in another tab in my browser, getting the path that I want, and then copying it back here to be able to just like click on something, create a token, or get the path is super powerful.
So cool.
Yeah, you know what I really, really like, and I don't have to bother Zach or anyone to make sure that I'm doing this right, is in these input objects when you get really deep into the NLU. So if I go like this and I hit an intent and I go into the input object and say I want to look at the disambiguation sentence for some reason, and I'll just close this out so we can see this. But I can copy this JSON path, and I never know how to write these. I'm really, really bad at this, right? So if I wanted to identify this and put it in there, I probably, as a non-technical person, would have a really hard time trying to remember how to write all this. I know it's input block, and then I go through the NLU, and then within the NLU, I go to intent mapper results, and then in that score. So there's a lot going on there, and to me, that is extremely helpful. And then to be able to store that in a token is just makes it a lot easier, right? So yeah, I love that feature. It's extremely helpful to us as we're building, we're building out the logic and trying to find places where we can make it as efficient as possible and easy to understand. And for me, as somebody who doesn't do any coding or anything like that, or very little, if I could even call it that, that's extremely helpful for me. So
how are you troubleshooting your voice flows?
Oh, good question. So there is a feature here. There's a couple of features. We'll start with live follow here. And this is one of my favorites. So if we have a voice bot and let's say I'm having issues with some sort of speech to text area, maybe it's not identifying a word properly, I can use live follow and input a user ID here. And this could be a web chat ID or a phone number. And I could actually troubleshoot this in real time. So if I just start live following, and then I call whichever number is associated with the voice gateway endpoint, I can go ahead and call it and you'll hear it.
Hi, and thank you for calling. To ensure I am speaking with the correct party, I need you to verify a few things about your insurance policy. What's the date of birth on the policy?
So at this point, it's looking for my input. It's looking for date of birth. I can say anything here. And in a moment, once I stop speaking, it'll pop up and give me an error message.
Yes, that's correct. I need your date of birth.
So here, you'll see everything that I'm saying. And if I'm having any issues with speech to text, or I need to debug anything or look for some point in the conversation where something's going wrong, I can come here, and I could also turn on expert mode within the Cognigy interaction panel to see kind of how it's flowing. And you could do that by hitting Control-Shift-F or coming to the settings tab here. And because this is just kind of like an authentication flow, it's not really showing you much of a path, but as you go through different flows, you can see it here.
Yeah, one thing that you can also do that's cool is if you go to the info tab right now and you go to the context, you will see the actual context from the phone call that you're making. And for troubleshooting, that's
It's incredible.
So cool.
Yeah, I wish we had that years ago.
Same.
Would have saved a lot of time.
Because I used to do things like create a say node that would just like output context values and stuff like that for troubleshooting. So this is 10,000 times better.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, super helpful for testing and making decisions if there are any bugs or anything like that. You could also do this from the voice call option here on the interaction panel. And once this is set up and you kind of choose your audio provider and you have your configuration settings within the agent settings here on the left, you can have this set up and change things within the IP settings as well. So here you have your voice call settings. We'll say we'll switch it to ARIA. And I believe this is, yes, everything's set properly. So we can go ahead and call this, and it's pretty much doing the same thing, right? So it is giving us an idea.
Hi, and thank you for calling.
So we can listen to the voice we chose. We can kind of test out the flow. We can interact with it here. It also has a dial pad here if there are any DTMF inputs you need to test. There it goes again.
Hi, and thank you for calling.
So that's extremely helpful, right? And another thing, so that way you don't have to necessarily set up an entire endpoint. You can kind of test how the flow is sounding. If you want to make any decisions to change the type of voice or audio provider you're using, you can do that there. You can also test these things out within the interaction panel text box here. So with the voice gateway nodes, you'll see they're indicated here. So this would be our web chat output. This is our voice gateway output. And we can just preview the voice here as well. So if we want to make any changes to what type of voice we're using, we can do that here. Just hit play audio.
How can we help you today? You could try saying make a payment or add item to
change it to a different voice.
How can we help you today?
That is a really odd voice.
It's a very strange one.
It's a very young person. But yeah, you can test all of that out. Previously, I would have to set up the endpoint, call the actual number. And this is just extremely helpful because you have situations where it might be the name of a product where the text-to-speech kind of gets it wrong. And so you might have to modify that, maybe change some SSML settings. Extremely
One thing
helpful.
you can do, James, is in that UI for the voice preview, the one at the bottom, is it has this little SSML little link thing. So that way it allows you to put in SSML, like you're saying, if it's a product name, or if you want to give different emphasis or pausing or whatever, you can do that within the UI as well.
Absolutely,
which is
yeah.
very, very useful because I always have to like go to the Microsoft website and track down their SSML editor and kind of do some testing here. But now it's all within the tool. Hooray!
Yeah, extremely convenient. Yeah, I love it, especially with how many voice bots we've been building lately. It's been awesome. So yeah, that is the voice preview, voice call, and live follow. The last thing I'm going to talk about is the playbook feature. And I could, I have this interaction here. I can easily make a playbook out of the interaction I'm having. And this is just a great way to test flows end to end. So say I get through the entirety of a flow. If I'm going to be making changes, maybe I create a playbook when I know it's working right. And then I could use that to test later on. I made a change. Let me see if it's still running in the same way that I expect. This is a good benchmark for that. This is also something that I personally use during the early stages of development when we start finishing out flows. If I have an issue at some point, I'll test it out in the interaction panel, and I'm just trying to flow end to end, make sure the user experience is working really smooth. And if I come across a bug and I can't figure it out, being a not very technical person, I simply just create a playbook and I'll name it something that indicates that there's an issue. That way I can just pass it off to one of my great devs like Zach or Jamie. And I say, hey, can you play this playbook? I'm getting an issue at this point. What do you think it is? And we can sort of, it starts a bit of collaboration.
I love that you use this so much because I think it used to be less of a prominent feature because in version 3 of Cognigy, the playback of playbooks was integrated into the interaction panel like we have it now. But we kind of rethought the interaction panel in version 4 and it kind of disappeared and you had to go into the settings to kind of re-enable it and run playbooks.
Yes.
But now it's here, which is good. And then the other thing that you can do is if you go to the playbooks UI real quick. Yeah.
Oops.
You can actually create playbooks here. And if you click on a specific playbook, let's give that a try. At the top, you see this runs option. And now you can run a playbook here, multiple playbooks, and you can see the history of did a run succeed or did it fail. and kind of see the details as to why. So we've kind of started abstracting out the playbook capability from having to just be in the UI client, the interaction panel client. And then the other thing that we can do, I think Jamie did something similar to this for us around the NLU testing side, is you can use APIs for playbooks now. So you can actually run the playbooks without ever having to be in the user interface itself. Another really great enhancement there.
Great.
Yeah,
The animation is incredible.
Yeah. And I love using playbooks for this reason. I mean, it used to be that I had to document everything, whether it's in an Excel sheet or a Word doc, and pass it off as a bug. And then it just helps us, become more collaborative as well. And I really enjoy working with this team. So
excellent.
I think that's it for the interaction panel.
Oh, there's one cool thing that you can show, or and that is the audit events. So for folks who are watching, is we used to have the audit history kind of behind the scenes in our system logs in Cognigy, but now you can actually access those yourself. So if you click on the profile icon, you'll go to audit events and you'll see everyone who's made any change to your virtual agent over time. So, and actually James is not sharing, I'll edit back here. So this is kind of what the UI is going to look like. You'll see which flow was affected, what action was executed. So you can almost see this as, it's not exactly this, but as kind of like what API calls were made to make changes to the flow. So it's very sweet. All right. So thank you, James. It sounds like you've been amazingly productive. I know that for this project, we are deploying it on a lot of different channels that the customer is potentially interested in. Zach was investigating the Amazon Lex endpoint. What is your report back on that for the
Yes. Yeah, thank you. You folks know how much I love an exciting new endpoint. And so I am very happy to tell you a little bit more about what I discovered when I set up Lex. I'm going to share my screen because I want to show you the documentation. So hold on just a moment. There it is. Can you see?
Perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, so as you know, the plan is eventually we're going to end up deploying this conversational experience into Amazon Connect, which, if you don't know, is Amazon's cloud-based contact center. And so that's a very exciting thing. To do that, to make that connection between Amazon Connect and Cognigy, we have to use Lex. And the reason behind that is that in the Amazon world of things, we need for Lex to kind of be something that we can really plug into their existing tools that they have, this one being Amazon Connect. But in the whole ecosystem, if you want to add a conversational experience, you really need it to be within Lex. And so since we've developed all this great stuff, all the things we've already done in Cognigy, to bring that to Amazon Connect, we really need this endpoint. So it's very, very exciting. Really happy to show it to you. And it's so well documented. Huge shout out to our support team. They just do such a great job documenting everything and really getting this ready to go so that I could work through it and show you what we need to do. So first, what we'll need when we're going to set up a Lex endpoint is a Lambda function. And just really quickly on Lambda functions, it's kind of plays the role as intermediary between Cognigy and Lex. So you can think of the Lex bot as like the equivalent of our own agents within Cognigy that just lives in AWS. And then over here is Cognigy. And then in between, we really need this Lambda piece. And essentially, it's a script. It's a piece of code that the Lambda function runs when it gets input through Amazon Connect, through the Lexbot. Here's the Lambda function in the middle, the code runs, and that is what sends things to Cognigy, and then everything comes back the same way through. So really quickly, I'll just show you. Again, awesome documentation here. We have the code all set up for the Lambda function, and I'll show you what it looks like in just a second, actually in AWS. But essentially, you just have to take your endpoint host name and the path, which is the URL token from the endpoint, and you just plug that into this script that has already been written for us. And I'm not going to bore you all with exactly what's going on here, but suffice it to say, this is what passes everything back and forth, like I was mentioning.
I love having code I can copy paste. That's how I do half of
Me
my
too.
coding.
Yes.
Makes life so much easier.
I love that. Yes. Now with ChatGPT, I could probably ask for this as well.
Exactly.
But to plug this in from the endpoint, I'll show you. We have this brand new Lex endpoint, and we would just take this information from the endpoint URL. The front part would be our host name, and then the back part would be our identifier. And we just plug that in. I'm in AWS now. This is the Lambda console. You can see I've created a function appropriately named my latest function. And you can see all I've had to do is just plug in these values from the documentation. And I have to associate this Lambda function. There's a little bit of extra work, but it's all fully documented as well. So when I create a Lexbot on this end, I'll just show you, this is what it looks like when you make a bot in AWS. This one's called WebBot, but I have to make this association with the Lambda function just real quick. If I click on aliases, and you see I've created a few, but this is my latest one. And it has an associated language for the bot. In the AWS world, this is how they manage their NLU. And so when we click this language, we can see what's actually associated with this NLU piece for the Lexbot is actually our Lambda function. And so every time this bot in AWS, if it's plugged into Amazon Connect or whatever, it will say, I have an input. Let me look at what I'm supposed to do for this input. And the input will say, oh, you have a Lambda function. Do whatever the Lambda function says, and that function will send everything to Cognigy. And then they will go back and forth. So super cool. Really, for Amazon Connect and for AWS, this is a really, really essential thing to bring the power of Cognigy. James, everything you just showed, all our development capabilities, the awesome OpenAI stuff that we have, it's really powerful. It's a great tool. Obviously,
and
we all
what
love
I
it.
like is, I love learning new tools, and I also hate learning new tools, especially if they're
Yeah.
not as good as the ones that I like using. So
Yes.
I love keeping let me do my flow development in Cognigy, but then be able to plug that into other things. And I think this is great.
Absolutely.
Jamie, I'm going to ask you to give us a WhatsApp update. So while you were kind of maybe teeing up your screen there, I wanted to mention also that we also have a NLU connector for Lex. So if you just want to use Lex for NLU, that connector is there for you. What Zach was showing is kind of like if you want to connect it to a bot that's going to get you going with Amazon Connect. But anyways, Jamie, while you're getting going, I will just tell you this story. I had a friend in the Philippines, and I was like, hey, iMessage rocks, doesn't it? And he's like, what are you talking about? No one in the world uses iMessage. It's just Americans. So WhatsApp is naturally a platform that we need to be on. So how's that going?
Yeah, and as someone who lived in the UK for 10 years, I can tell you I was shocked when I moved back to the US and discovered no one uses it here. But I think it's growing in popularity, at least in my experience. I think it's hugely important to raise the fact that WhatsApp is one of the most popular messaging services, messaging channels in the world. It has over 244 billion users global, something that companies are looking a lot more closely at. Beyond that, our native integration with WhatsApp gives us so much access to rich content and the ability to really enhance that user experience and journey in the channel. And I'd love to show you that.
Okay, great. I will put my iMessage torch down for a moment.
So this is a bit of our documentation because with everything that we do, it's highly documented in our help center, really easy to follow along and implement. If you're going to be implementing WhatsApp, you need two tools. First, you need Facebook for developers, so Meta for Developers as it's now called, and you're going to create an app here. This app is basically going to act as your intermediary between your WhatsApp account and our bot platform. And within here, once you've created your app, you'll add the product for WhatsApp, and it will give you everything you need to get started, literally under the Getting Started panel. It'll give you an access token, it'll give you a test number to validate the connection points with, and you can later add in your own phone number to communicate on WhatsApp with. Once you have all that configured and you've gone through the documentation, you'll be collecting details from that app to connect to our endpoints. So if I click over to the endpoints, there's a few fields we're going to fill out. We're going to get your app ID, access token, phone number ID, all from within this app here. Later, when we do a full verification token, you'll create that in the next tool, which is Meta Business Settings. So you'll create a system user, which gives API access and the right kind of access to your app, to our platform. And that's where you'll create a user and generate a token for them. Once everything is connected, and it really is that easy, just a few clicks of a button will document in our platform through our 2 documents here around creating that initial point of action and then around creating a permanent access token. That's what you need to achieve. You connect it and then you're ready to test it. In this use case, I've just created a really simple bot that's going to help walk us through a few of the critical use cases that I love and get really excited by on WhatsApp. As a regular WhatsApp customer, a lot of these things are familiar to me, and I love that they're open to businesses now. In this example, I'm going to start with location content. So one of the cool features we can do is you can provide information about a specific location back to your consumer. In this case, I've set it as our Cognigy North American headquarters. And if I were to click through this link, it would bring me to Google Maps and have that specific address represented.
That's beautiful. That's
yeah,
really
I love
nice.
it.
Yeah.
It's a great representation too. Like visually, it's great.
Yes.
I know. I'm thinking that's near my house somewhere, I think, our office.
The other thing I love about this too is if anyone's using WhatsApp, they may know that it's very easy to send contact cards, similar like you would do potentially with iMessage, Derek. So what happens if I say, can you send that to me as a card so I can save that address? I'm traveling there and I want to see it. And so that card comes through and this can be saved to your phone. And it has all that representation the same.
Awesome.
Love it. The other thing it does fantastically well is rich content. So I'm going to say, show me the rich content. In this case, we're going to look at a link to register for this webinar. And what it's going to do, it's going to give you a fantastic preview. You get the kind of screenshot from the web page, the title, the introduction, and that's all relevant here. As a WhatsApp user, anytime I send a link, this happens and it comes up automatically. And having that ability for a business as well can really enhance that kind of user experience and understanding what the links are that you're supplying to them.
This terrifies me for one reason. It's like, what happens if you click the webinar sign up link from within the webinar? Don't do it. Don't do it.
Don't try. Yeah.
I will leave it there. We're not going to click it because I have one more thing I really want to show you guys, right? Can I see the video content? So this is the last piece that I want to highlight. And I think video in WhatsApp is super compelling. The greatest part is it's embedded in WhatsApp. It's not taking me out to another web page. I can click on it and it's automatically going to play the video for me. Similarly, and I don't have it. Oh, I think I do have it in this example. What about YouTube? What happens if you send a YouTube link? So we saw the rich content here and we've seen the video here. If I click on the YouTube link, it's actually going to do a picture-in-picture for me and play it in the WhatsApp experience, which I think is super
That's really cool.
My mind is
blown.
Yeah. So I think there's some really great use cases for WhatsApp. I'm hyper obsessed with it. That might just be the European side of my brain, but I think that there's a lot of value in it, a lot of customers in it, and so many really cool use cases you can execute with it.
Yeah. The other thing, which I have done a little bit of looking into it, I can see on the PC and also on the Mac, there's a desktop client for WhatsApp. So if you're a developer and kind of doing your testing, you don't have to be on your phone interacting with WhatsApp or anything.
And this one's just my web browser, but you could do it on your phone, web browser, desktop app. It's really a robust application.
Excellent. Good job. So what I want to do, per usual, I have a meeting coming up and I don't want to be my classic 2 minutes late to that meeting. So I want to crank through, just give you guys a few updates on what I've been doing. And it's kind of random scattershot, but on the topic of the endpoints is I want to show you some of the handover provider work I've been doing. So getting on the topic of WhatsApp is how cool would it be to be able to provide a live agent experience on WhatsApp? So we have the automated part of the conversation like we're used to, and then we do the agent handover. It's all in WhatsApp. So what I'm looking at right now, if you are not a contact center agent yourself, is kind of my agent workspace within Genesis. What we did probably within the past few months is added a Genesis handover provider. So just like we've had handover providers for Salesforce and RingCentral and other platforms, we now have one for Genesis Cloud. You do your standard copy and pasting of a million different things. We have it documented on the website pretty nicely. You do that, and then now we can use Genesis as a handover provider. So I am just going to open my web chat here, and as a simple example, I think I'm going to say, can I talk to someone? It's going to give me a pre-chat screen using an adaptive card, which I created using ChatGPT. And then, oops, I got my phone number. Real phone number. This is my real email address, and you're always welcome to email me. And click submit. And then now it's going to do the agent handover. As a agent, I actually hear this wonderful ringing in my ear right now, so I'm going to go ahead.
I love that ringtone. That's great. Yeah, so identifiable.
So I'm going to pick up this call and I'll say, hi, how's it going? Which is like my super professional intro whenever I am talking to someone. And then you'll see over here, I have that conversation going. So it's a really nice way. We have our own live agent tool, which I'll just mention here. I want to show you guys something in a second. But most folks come in with their own digital platform. And so if you're using Genesis, boom, today, this is here for you. I want to show you a couple of other things on our live agent side. So we've all kind of been playing with the live agent tool over the past year or so. One of the things that's there now is you can have an assist bot for agents. So it's kind of like your own personal chatbot for an agent. The way that you do it is you go to the inbox that's associated with the virtual agent that you're working on. Kind of the flow hands it off to that inbox. You go to the configuration, and now you can configure an agent-facing assist bot. And to add this, you just click add a bot, you give it a name. And what you'll do is in your virtual agent, you'll create a web chat endpoint and then just put the endpoint URL right here. And that creates your assist bot. So what does it actually do? Well, I think I have a good example I can show you. I'm going to show you a different screen here. And go here and go here. Ta-da! All right, so let me find this one. Thank you for the round of applause. I will refresh this just to make sure I'm still alive here. And let's say click this. I want to talk to someone. Okay, now we do the handover. And now I'm the agent and I get this handover in my inbox. So here's the message. And I can just say, hello, Derek. I'll use my Whisper Assist thing to push that in there. Oops, there we go. It's going to send that message. Now, if the customer is asking me a question that I don't know how to handle, I click on Assist right here, and I have my own agent-facing bot that customer doesn't see, and that I can ask it questions. So I think I can ask it a question like, I have something pasted here. Where can I find a beneficiary change form? Something that rolls off the tongue. So if I do that here, it's going to give me an answer. So I'm an agent, I see this. Now, maybe this is text that I can just type in or maybe elaborate on, or I can push this widget right into my conversation with a customer. Boom. So we have the Whisper Assist feature. That's this thing up here where I can just push messages in. But the Assist bot is like the agent's ad hoc place to be able to ask questions and get answers and share them. So I think that's pretty cool. What do you
That's
think?
very cool.
Yeah.
Agents are going to love that. That's going to be a nice way to lower their AHT as well, because otherwise they'd have to be switching screens right to different things all the time,
Yeah.
and that's really nice to have that experience brought in for them there, for sure.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Some other cool things, just real quick. I have my notification center now. I have no unread notifications because I'm just on top of it. But if you see your notifications coming in, those will show here. A few other nice little features coming in, but one that I really wanted to show is the new supervisor dashboard. So I am going to present here and go to perhaps this window. Let's see. No, I don't like that window. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do something else in Cognigy. I'm just going to escalate the permissions of my agent. I'll share that real quick. And there's basically new roles that we have. If I go into this one, there we go. I'm back in my admin view here. What I can do is I'll go back to Cognigy and I'll go to my access controls. I'm going to find my user, Derek. I have a special user for this little event here. Right now it's configured as an agent. I'm going to go ahead and configure it as a supervisor. There we go.
A quick promotion there.
Yeah, exactly. Comes with a pay raise. And so now I'm configured as a supervisor. And the thing that I actually wanted to show you, the reason I kind of wanted to call this out in the first place, is the reports that it now makes available to me. If I go back here and I'll refresh this, so let's see if I have these new permissions. Now you'll see I have my reports here on the side. On this overview tab, now if you scroll down to the bottom, you're going to see the conversations by agent and all my status. So what agents do I have online now? How many messages are queued? How many folks are working with? And kind of all of these metrics per agent. So I think that is a super nice enhancement. The last thing I wanted to share is that in Cognigy Insights, we have a new thing that's kind of related to the agent availability, agent productivity topic. So if you go into Insights, see this here, and I might have it over here. Actually, go here. Where's my Insights? There it is. If you go to your engagement dashboard, it's kind of another like live agent focused thing. You'll see this heat map, and the problem it's trying to solve is, if I look at this past month, for example, where were my busiest times where handovers were going to agents? There's not a lot of data in this now, but I can say, here on Wednesday, February 15th at 7 o'clock, there were lots of handovers. And I can use this to help forecast from a workforce management perspective. When do I need who sitting in what seats and when? So another really nice feature there. So that's a quick roundup of some cool new stuff in Cognigy. To close things out, I want to do a quick round robin talking about our generative AI features. We had this amazing webinar, super fun, where we talked about the integration of OpenAI with the Cognigy platform. And this is all in the product if you sign up for trial right now, or if you're in a customer environment, you can look there. If you've upgraded to the latest version, you'll see all these features right there in the UI for you. But I want to do a quick hit round robin to say, what's a sentence or two about what you like best about generative AI and Cognigy? And we'll start with Jamie.
Sure. So I think from my perspective, it's the efficiency gains while building and training the NLU. The ability that we have in the platform now to use generative AI to create flows or create training phrases for the NLU or the lexicons for that matter is an incredible time saver. It allows me then to spend my time, effort, and knowledge, applying best practices, making it more sophisticated, and really taking that expertise to the next level, with all the grunt work really having been achieved by the generative AI features that we have. So it's a big win for me.
That's awesome. James, what do you think?
Yeah, I think two main things with the OpenAI integration is like the biggest thing and the thing I've been having the most fun with is using it as a sort of fallback, or using it to take care of the small talk problem. And that's something that has to be done to make the conversation feel natural, but it takes up so much time. And so now by utilizing that as sort of a fallback path and kind of using default counters or something to keep the user on track and try to stick with the main purpose of the bot, I'm able to focus on the stuff that matters more, which is the user experience. I mean, that is my entire job, is to focus on that, make sure the user is flowing through the conversation naturally. And that's just a huge help. And the second thing is the potential to identify in the user intent and possible entities within extremely verbose user utterances, which is something classical ML models, they're not really scanning huge bodies of text, but some people do speak naturally that way and give you a lot of context and maybe a story you don't need to hear. And the generative AI integration really can help with that, which is nice. And that's exciting to me.
Excellent. And Zach, I will give you the last word.
Yeah, for me, it's going to have to be lexicon generation. The era of trying to think of tons of synonyms for different words, which involves a lot of Googling and brain racking, and honestly is maybe one of the least enjoyable things you could really do, is over. So I'm really, really excited about that. Generating a lexicon with a few clicks and some words is like magic.
Indeed. And I would say my kind of high level comment is this is one of the first technologies, certainly in conversational AI, where the time horizon for us seeing changes in how we do work and what we build and what the Cognigy platform even looks like, it's not 3 years from now or 5 years from now. It's literally within months. You're going to see much more within Cognigy, and you'll just see a revolution in our industry with how we build automated dialogues. So I am super excited about it. So per usual, I'm being called to another call. And I know you guys are probably late for your calls as well. So I just wanted to thank you, Zach, Jamie, and James, being part of the team meeting and being amazing team members. And looking forward to talking with you more very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
All right, so okay, hey Benny. Sorry I was late. I was just coming from another call. I wanted to adjust my camera there real quick.
All good.
So how are you doing?
I'm good. A bit busy as usual, but fine.
Okay, good. Well, thanks for taking the time. It's always good to see your face again. I needed help with a thing today, which is we have a prospective customer we're talking to. From my understanding is they run some in-house kind of legacy .NET applications. I'm pretty sure they're running them on-prem. Not the most advanced in kind of their understanding of modern application architectures, I guess. They've asked us for a synopsis of kind of what we do for performance, scalability, and high availability, as this is kind of part of their transition to the cloud for a lot of their applications. So I wanted to get just kind of help me out of getting kind of a sense of how I can talk to them about what we do, how our SaaS environment, they're doing our SaaS version out on-prem, runs, and what we do to kind of keep it up and running and in high performance.
I think what we can do is we can ask them whether they can present how they currently run their products. I mean, you mentioned they run .NET applications, but what is their current strategy regarding failovers and regarding scalability? So my guess is they most likely run their applications on a scale set of servers, and then they have some sort of load balancing mechanism in front of those application servers. And then usually there's some database technology involved in the backend, and all of these individual machines connect to that database. Maybe it's a managed product if they
or
the
SQL
cloud.
Server, most likely.
Yeah. And if they maybe in the first step present what they're doing at the moment, then we can come and we can also present how we do it. That we run our applications on top of Kubernetes. They can consume, so we would run it for them. We would consume a managed Kubernetes service. I think I would most likely highlight that high scale, high capacity, and fault tolerance actually, of course, starts at the hardware level. So we usually take a managed Kubernetes instance at AWS, for instance, and then bring up at least 6 machines. These machines, they would run in different availability zones in a specific hosting region. So let's say a US customer, we would pick maybe a data center in US West. And then our application would run as containers orchestrated by Kubernetes. These containers would run on these 6 machines, 2 machines in each availability zone. And of course, this is more or less like the hardware layer. And then we also have to tell them, okay, but now on the product layer or in the product layer, we have our microservices. So if they go for Cognigy AI and Live Agent and Voice Gateway for all of it, it's more than 65 microservices that we have in total meanwhile. And we run at least 3 copies of each microservice. For some of the copies for some of the microservices in Cognigy AI, we run more. But I think we should then also show them that these copies would run on different machines and spread across the different availability zones where the machines are physically present.
All right, so let's stop there for a second. So, I mean, the microservice concept might be new to them, but I think it's fairly intuitive. Essentially, instead of having DLLs in the .NET world, you have a set of services which essentially expose internal APIs that the application uses to execute specific application functionality, right? And does that sound like a fair summary of it, or what would you say?
I would say yes. The main difference will most likely be, I mean, this is why we also originally picked and settled on microservices. I mean, you know it from day one. We started to build our products and containerize them, and the main goal at the very beginning was, or our main motivator was, we want to use different technologies. So for our NLU stack, maybe we use a little bit of Python because the libraries in the machine learning world are a lot of good libraries are written in Python. But then we saw, okay, in other areas, parsing text files and so on, when you, for instance, in Cognigy AI upload a lexicon CSV file, we actually use Golang because it is very efficient to parse binary and also textual data using a language like Golang. And this is most likely the main difference. Your DLLs in the .NET world, they would be most likely written in similar languages.
C# or...
And we can just say, okay, every container, every microservice can in theory use a totally different programming language, a totally different set of libraries and technologies, essentially the best technology for the job. But there's similarities. Yeah.
So how has our own, I know we use Kubernetes to kind of manage a number of facets, deployment, scalability, and high availability, I'd say, with the platform. How has our own thinking, let's say, evolved since the early days of Cognigy to now in terms of how we're managing the platform?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot that actually happened. So at the beginning, I mean, we started to have a handful of microservices, and we would literally actually SSH on servers and run Docker run statements and bring up the individual containers by hand. That was at the very early stages, like 5.5, 6 years ago. Then we picked a mini container orchestrator that is actually built into the Docker binary called Docker Swarm. Docker Swarm is actually still around, but not really used in production, at least if you run a lot of containers. There are some big fans saying you can actually do that, but we said, okay, we go for the big brother, which is Kubernetes. And then I think it was Cognigy version 3.2 when we actually started to publish our first assets that you need to deploy the application. Cognigy.AI back then only on top of Kubernetes, but back then it was really just like getting it out there, somehow making it work with Kubernetes. And throughout the last year, we released the Helm chart for Cognigy.AI, which made it which makes it super simple to install the product, upgrade it with a single command, do a rollback with a single command if that is necessary. And in our own cloud environments, we actually jumped or hopped in or brought in an even additional technology, which is called Flux. And Flux is a CD system. It is Kubernetes native. And essentially what it does, it runs inside of each Kubernetes cluster, and it polls external Git repositories for configuration. So in the end, no longer our SRE engineers and actually connect to the Kubernetes cluster and push some data into it or tell it essentially which containers to run, but you just create a pull request in a code repository, somebody reviews it, and then if you merge it into your main or master branch, 2 minutes later, Flux will actually poll the new state and just install the product for you. And this way you have full traceability of what actually happens in your on your architect or in your infrastructure layer by just going through the commit log of a Git repository. That's of course super nice. Yeah.
Okay, I want to ask a follow-up question, but then also I want to rewind for a second. So for Flux, then how do you control when you do a new release? This might sound like a very elementary question, but so for example, in a traditional CI/CD pipeline, you can do pull requests and you kind of automate, so that way you kind of have ongoing refreshes, as it were, of your dev environment or something like that. How does Flux work when you really want to control, like, okay, we need to go into production at 2 a.m. on Thursday or something like that?
Yeah. So I think that there's actually two things. The first thing is Flux uses, it's pretty technical, of course, but Flux uses the concept of custom resources. So Kubernetes actually has a very interesting concept that they use internally. So you can actually create your own object in Kubernetes that could be a Cognigy snapshot. And you can actually tell Kubernetes this object, a bit similar to a Kubernetes deployment or a Kubernetes service or a Kubernetes ingress. These are built-in objects, but you can actually bring in your own idea of your own object. How this looks like essentially is that you tell Kubernetes, here is some JSON schema. You describe the individual fields of your object. You say the name is a Cognigy snapshot. It has, let's say, a field description and another field called URL, where you store your snapshot physically. And once you teach it that a Cognigy snapshot is something that it should know about, you can then also write a YAML file. This is what you do in Kubernetes usually. You can write a YAML file of an actual snapshot, and you can apply it to the Kubernetes API server. Kubernetes will handle it, so you can actually use kubectl, the CLI tool, to create these type of new resources, delete them, list them. And then you run an additional component inside of the cluster, controller. And that controller would get notifications when you apply a Cognigy snapshot. It would actually then start something for you or stop something for you. And that's exactly what Flux did. They brought in more or less three custom objects: a Git repository. This way you can express where it fetches its configuration. A Helm release. This way you tell it, run exactly this release of Cognigy AI with version 4.45 in that cluster, and a couple of other resources. And what we essentially just do in that code repository is we just keep a Helm release object for Cognigy AI.
Got it.
And then we just say run release 4.45. And then it just installs that Helm release for us. And if you want to do a rollback, you just need somebody change that number in that repository and say, no, please run 4.44. You just commit, you push, maybe you have a pull request in between, a colleague does a quick review, you just change the number, and then it downgrades it automatically for you.
Nice. So that has, the effort it takes to deploy a Cognigy release it's amazing. And I think, if I'm right, we have zero downtime when we do those releases as well, right? Because it's just
Exactly.
essentially updating some services in the background and then kind of retiring the old services. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, and kind of suddenly have updated running versions.
Yeah, this is essentially how it works. We have the individual copies of, let's say, microservice A running. There's copy 1, 2, 3, and then during an update, if the code of microservice A has changed, a fourth copy comes up, but that already contains the new code, number 4, and then maybe number 1 goes down. This way, you still have 3 copies, but one of these copies now uses the new code. And you just do that over and over and over again until you have replaced all of your containers that run in production. And of course, for the no downtime capabilities, you actually need to do a lot of effort in product development. The product needs to be built in a way, for instance, if your copy number 1 has just received a request and is now doing something. So let's say that operation takes 30 seconds, but during these 30 seconds, you would actually stop it. Then you need to make sure that the request is retried. This needs to happen automatically so that in the code, you don't need to implement that over and over and over again. So we have written internal libraries and packages that handle this retry mechanism. But in the end, this way you can achieve real no downtime rollovers or deployments.
Nice. So maybe you don't have to do this on Thursday at 2 o'clock in the morning. Okay, so let me go to my 101 question that I want to kind of organize my thoughts on for this customer, and then I'll let you go. Is the heart of the thing is this, and hopefully this is stating the obvious, my own understanding is right. So what Kubernetes gives us from a performance perspective, or a scalability perspective, I'd say, is the ability to allocate hardware resources to specific microservices based on the demands of those microservices. And then from a high availability perspective, what we have is the ability for having multiple copies of a microservice, so that way one can fail and there's other services available to handle it or other copies available to handle it. And we can kind of continuously respawn these either within a single availability zone or across availability zones. Is that kind of a decent description of scalability and high availability with how we're using Kubernetes?
So I would say so. Maybe the important part is that, of course, the respawning dead components or components that died, this happens automatically. All of our microservices, for instance, implement best practices when it comes to probes. So in Kubernetes, you have concepts where Kubernetes can actually knock at the door of each microservice, let's say every 30 seconds. And if the service is unable to respond to this health check, essentially, then it can, for instance, mark that service as unhealthy and automatically restart it, right? And as you said, this is, for instance, what we also do in all of our hand charts for all of our products. You can tell Kubernetes, please prefer running multiple replicas in different zones in case different zones exist. So this way, if a customer says, I want to go super small, I don't need the availability because we are starting with a super small pilot, for instance, they can pick a hosting region, but only maybe spawn 3 machines or 2 machines in the same zone. So they won't get this benefit. But as soon as they want to go large, they add a couple more machines, they just redeploy, and then Kubernetes will just automatically try, now that it's aware of the additional 2 zones, it will just try to move some of these copies to other machines or in other zones. And this way, you get the fault-tolerant part. And of course, this is what we're working on at the moment. We already have a huge chunk of the Cognigy AI runtime services built in a way that they use horizontal pod autoscaling. That's also a feature in Kubernetes that automatically senses some performance metrics of individual services. And if they are like overloaded or if the CPU load goes above a certain level, they automatically add new copies of this specific service. And usually in those managed clusters, you also have a cluster autoscaler. So if eventually you have not enough machines in your cluster, AWS using the cluster autoscaler will just add new machines, and they will also try to put these machines equally distributed into the different zones. This way, everything just grows and expands if it has to, but it also shrinks automatically once again for cost-saving reasons.
Nice. Well, you have achieved my goal of giving me enough information to make me sound smarter than I am. So I'll much appreciated as always. You don't see this, maybe you do. My cats are biting my toes because they're hungry, so I need to go feed them. And also I need to hand it back to HQ. So thanks for talking, Benny. It's always fun. And I'll see you next time I'm in Germany.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thanks to Benny and everyone who joined the webinar today. I hope you enjoyed this format. If you didn't, or if you did, please let us know. And we're always happy to improve how we bring you this kind of information. But to wrap it up, I'm going to turn it back over to Sebastian, who will have some final comments for us. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Derek, Benny, and everyone in the teams for putting all of this together. Before we leave, 2 remarks. Let me remind you of the Cognigy AI community, where you can ask questions and network with your peers. There are so many smart and experienced people in the audience. We just love to continue the conversation at Cognigy.com/community. In the unlikely case that you are not yet a Cognigy AI user, be aware that we have a free trial version available where you can sign up and start building your own conversational experiences today. So thanks everyone for watching, and see you next time.